お願いします。Please join me in Gasho. Naman loves, Naman loves, Naman loves, Naman loves, Naman loves, Naman loves. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our regular Sunday service. So usually after our Obon service, we go into our summer schedule, sort of a little bit more informal than our regular services, but welcome, and welcome to those who are joining us by Zoom as well. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a good day. And we'll begin this service with a moment of silent meditation, followed by the recitation of the name of the Buddha or the Onenbutsu. Naman loves, Naman loves, Naman loves, Naman loves, Naman loves. Next, we'll be reading the Golden Chain. And in this Seiten, purple Seiten, You'll find it on page. Where is that? You'll find it on page 290 of the Purple Satan. And for those of you at home, even those of you here, if you wish, I'm also bringing it up on the screen. Golden chain of love. I am a link in Amida Buddha's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. In gratitude, may I keep my link bright and strong. I will try to be kind and gentle to every living being and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will try to think pure and beautiful thoughts, to say pure and beautiful words, and to do pure and beautiful deeds, knowing that what I do affects not only my happiness or unhappiness, but also those of others. May every link in Amida Buddha's golden chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Thank you. Namandos. Next, we'll be chanting the Junirai. In the Purple Satan, you'll find it on page 63. Namandos. Shiteni shok yo Amida sen yo zoku son Thy be me anago muryo bushi shui ne oni yo nyo sen no Shabada gyo nyo zobu Yomo gujo nyaku shodenge Oga chorai minason Me Nyomanga Igo Yunyo Senichigat Shonyo Tenge Keshira Oga Chorai Minason Kanon Jodai Kanchi Shuje So Shogun No Bukugedo Magema Oga chorai minason Mubi mugu gojojo Shutoku geketsu nyogoku Shosari yakutoku jidai 오가 조라이미다소 지모명모사시 무려조마조사나 이쇼시조간이기지 고가조라이미다소 본다요겐지쇼게 생거조조배다이사 어이사조요세노 보가조라이미다소 지모조라이쇼버시 갱겐지드시아나 생거성겐조극경 오가조라이미다소 쇼조무가도 야근요스이가드대요로 이시세범묘지 오가조라이미다소 이섬무세트무금요 야금은연이야그노후 shunyishi 오가조라이미다소 이섬무려 횡교 무쇼시아그지시기 오조다시보다 오가조라이미다소 가데드이성그덕지 즈네요가이스 쇼갸 그대가 조조샤 세시요 쇼히노 나마 나무 나마나무 나마나무 니싱은 도그 요노세이사이 노드모다이시 오우저 아나로 Namandavs, 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 Namandavs. Please join me in reading the English translation, which you'll find in your Seiken on page 70. And I'm going to also bring it on the screen. The 12 Adorations, Junilai translation. Before Amida Buddha, whom heavenly beings worship, I humble myself in deepest reverence. In his wondrous land of bliss, surrounded is he by countless bodhisattvas. His golden form shines forth, pure like the king of Mount Sumeru. His practice of truth is steadfast, like an elephant's pace. His voice radiate like pure blue lotus blossoms. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. His countenance is perfectly pure and round, like the full moon. His majestic light shines like 1,000 suns and moons. His voice is like a heavenly drum, yet like a heavenly bird, Kokila. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. Avalokiteshvara wears upon his crown the image of Amida adorned with many precious jewels. He subdues the arrogance of demons and heretics. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. Incomparable, vast and pure, his virtues are, clearly extending like vast open space. His acts freely benefiting all. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. Bodhisattvas from the 10 quarters and countless Maras always venerate him. He dwells with vow power for the sake of all beings. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. In the golden treasure palm where the lotus flowers bloom, established with goodness is a wondrous throne, where reigns the Buddha like the king of the mounts. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. From the 10 quarters, bodhisattvas come, revealing wondrous powers, they attain blissful state. Honoring his face, they offer eternal homage. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. All things are transient and without self, like the moon, the unwatered, lightning, shadow, or the dew. The Dhamma cannot be expressed by words, the Buddha proclaimed. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. No words of evil are in his land, no fear of evildoers nor evil paths. With sincere heart, all beings worship him. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. His land of infinite expediencies is without degenerate things or wicked beings. Upon rebirth, non-retrogressive bodhi does one attain. Thus I prostrate myself before Amida Buddha. Thus have I praised the virtues of Amida Buddha. Boundless are they like the water of the sea. Upon receiving these pure and good qualities, may all beings be reborn into his land. Namamidavs, Namamidavs, Namandavs, Namandavs, Namandavs. Change the view here. Good morning again, and welcome to that. So this morning, as we gather here for this regular Sunday service, I'd like to take this opportunity just to give a brief Dharma message. First of all, the chanting that we do. Okay, these are all either the words of the Buddha or of prominent monks. In this case, was written by a person by the name of Nagarjuna, who lived in India, so about 2,200 years ago. And he is very prominent in promoting what we call the Pure Land teachings. So it's his chanting that we chanted this morning. And when we do the chanting, of course, this was a tradition in the Buddhist teaching of how the teachings were transmitted. They were transmitted orally, so from teacher to disciple. But over the many years, in order to memorize it, they took on the form of chanting. So that's why we have chanting. And then usually following the chanting, we have a discourse. Okay, so that's how the services generally work. And today I wanted to share with you. So yesterday here, we must have had about 100 people, I guess. We had a wedding here. It was very nice. People often associate the temple with funerals or memorial services, but not as many weddings, you know. And this wedding was particularly important because this couple they had actually gotten married 2 years ago during the pandemic. Okay, and they were supposed to have this big wedding. They had planned it before the pandemic, but when the wedding date came around, we were right in the heart of the pandemic. And so they weren't allowed to have a large gathering. So we had 2 years ago a very, very private gathering with just the very immediate family. But the couple always wanted to have the wedding ceremony shared by all their friends and family. So last year they tried holding it, and again, the pandemic was still right in the middle of it. So it got delayed again. So finally, after 2 years, we were able to have it. And they were so happy to be able to gather in a group. So that was yesterday. But, you know, as I was thinking about the wedding, it brought back memories for myself. And I've had some very memorable, I guess, events with weddings. And in particular, I've had the opportunity to conduct wedding ceremonies twice in Japan. Okay, the first time was in 2005, and this was the occasion was one of my best friends in Japan was getting married. So he asked if there's any way that I could go to Japan to conduct this wedding ceremony. And so, you know, unless it's somebody very special, I wouldn't fly all the way to Japan just to conduct a wedding ceremony. But I felt quite honored, and I was happy to be able to go and conduct that wedding ceremony. And what was very interesting about this ceremony was that it was held in the heart of Kyoto. So Kyoto, as many of you know, is sort of the heart of Buddhism in Japan. You know, there's so many temples in Japan. In fact, they say if you were to go out every weekend to visit a temple in Kyoto, you could spend your lifetime and not visit all the temples. So there are many, many temples throughout Kyoto. But where this person was getting married, it was actually not a temple, but it was a wedding hall. So I don't know if they're still that popular today. Well, they might be, but over the years in Japan, there were many places that were popped up where people can have ceremonies that were not linked to like a temple or a church. Okay, so these are wedding halls basically. And this particular wedding hall was unique in that it used to be an old classical Japanese inn that they converted into a wedding hall. Big place, like four stories high, I believe it was. And you could have your wedding ceremony. So on the 4th floor, they had a chapel. And the bottom 3 floors, they had all these wedding halls or reception halls. So you can have your wedding ceremony and your reception all in one place. Okay. And what was really fascinating about this was that despite the fact that this was in the middle of Kyoto with all of this Buddhism around it, and this wedding hall, they averaged about 400 weddings a year, they said. And so you could have multiple weddings going on at the same time. And despite the number of weddings that they did, this was actually the very first Buddhist wedding that was occurring in this wedding hall. And you might find that kind of odd that in Japan, they weren't having Buddhist weddings. But the way the Japanese work, they're very particular and superstitious, and they have different views on things. So when a child is born, or often at weddings, they'll do it at a Shinto shrine, okay? Or more recently, Christian churches are also popular. So the wedding hall that they had on the fourth floor had stuff for a Christian wedding or a Shinto wedding, but they didn't have anything for a Buddhist wedding. So I actually had to contact my cousin who lived about 5 blocks away from this place. It's my mother's home temple. So my mother comes from a temple family. So I had to ask my cousin if we could bring some Buddhist things from the temple to this wedding hall, including a statue of the Buddha, etc. So we had to set it all up. And we held this Buddhist wedding. Now, usually with the wedding ceremonies, generally in Japan, it's usually just the families that gather for the ceremony. And then at the receptions, co-workers and friends, etc., come to the reception, but not the ceremony, okay? But because of the uniqueness of this, all their friends were interested in attending the ceremony because they said they've never attended a Buddhist wedding. So as I mentioned, there's weddings and childbirth, they usually go to the Shinto shrine. And then funerals and memorial services, they'll go to the temple. So they're very, they've got this outline of where they go for what event, okay? So Buddhist weddings were a minority in Japan. But what was interesting was after that wedding, all the friends and colleagues were saying, it was so refreshing and nice. It was very different from the Christian weddings or the Shinto weddings. And I found this quite interesting. So that was the first time I conducted a wedding in Japan. The second time, which was also just as memorable, was quite unique. It was in 2016. One of my former Dharma school students from Toronto happened to be living in Tokyo. And he asked me if I could go to Japan to conduct a wedding ceremony there. And it just so happened that around that same time, a couple of weeks before, I was actually leading a group from Canada to go on a visit to the Honganji, the Mother Temple. There was a special service there. So I was going to be in Japan about that time. So I said, sure, I would love to conduct a wedding ceremony. Now, this was unique, and just bear with me. Can you see on the screen? Can you all see that? Yeah. This was unique because where they were going to get married was the Tsukiji Honganji in Tokyo. Okay. Tsukiji Honganji is a very, very large temple. If any of you have gone to Tokyo and gone to the Honganji, it's a very unique looking building, as you can see in the picture as well. This was actually erected at the time of Gomonshu Otani Kozui, who in the beginning of the 1900s, the beginning of the 20th century, this was erected. And the Tsukiji Honganji temple is quite unique. The architecture is very different, not like a typical Japanese building or temple. And it is actually designed after some of the buildings that they saw along the Silk Road. They did an expedition, and they took that as the motif. But it is one of the Betsuin, which is a special temple that's directly linked with the mother temple, Honkan-ji. And so not just anybody could go there to conduct a wedding ceremony. Okay, people do get married there. It's quite a popular wedding site, but they have their own staff. The Honganji has its own staff. So it's quite unusual for somebody like myself who doesn't work there to be able to get permission to conduct a wedding ceremony there. But I did get permission, and we held the wedding ceremony there. And again, this was quite unique. Tsukiji Honganji is unique for not just its architecture, but some of the things that they have in there. They wanted to modernize the Buddhist temple. So they were one of the first, they were the first temple to import an organ, pipe organ. So there's actually a pipe organ in this temple. So the wedding ceremony included pipe organ music. It also included the classical gagaku, which is the Japanese court music. So it was a very, very elaborate affair. And I conducted it both in Japanese and English. But again, after the ceremony, people were saying, oh, how refreshing it was that we held this Buddhist wedding ceremony. They really liked it. And one of the things they really liked, they said, it's so nice to smell the incense, the aroma of the incense. And as I was thinking of that, I thought, it's so strange. Here I am in Japan, and people are saying how refreshing it is to have a Buddhist ceremony. You would think in Japan, people are used to these things, but it's all in context, depending on, if it was a Buddhist funeral, everybody's fine or used to that. But a Buddhist wedding, they weren't quite used to. But so those are a couple of the memorable weddings that I conducted. But, as I think about the Japanese culture, and some people from here, we might think, well, they're very shallow in their religious beliefs, and in that they'll go to a church to get married, and they'll have a Buddhist funeral. And if they have children, they'll go to a Shinto shrine to introduce it to the gods. And so some people from the West think that sometimes that, they don't have much of faith, if you will. They'll follow anything. But as I was studying in Japan, I really took on a different view. And what it is that Japan, and we see this in all aspects of the culture, they're very, very good at importing something and making it uniquely their own, right? So we see that with, in the early, the 19th, or the 20th century, we saw that with electronics, right? TV was not originated in Japan, but we know how Japan developed electronics, right? Everybody, my generation, remembers the Sony Walkman and things like that, right? And we see this also with all the culture of Japan, the automobile industry, right? Japan took in the automobile industry, and now it's probably the leading country for automobile production. But also with religion, I think the attitude of the people is that they will take in anything that they feel will be beneficial in their spiritual growth. So it doesn't, as long as it's not harming them, they're really open to it. And actually, I find this kind of refreshing. So here in our Judeo-Christian society in the West, we have a tendency to look at things very black or white, right? If you're a Buddhist, you're 100% Buddhist. If you're a Christian, you're 100% Christian, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, sometimes that kind of thought or attitude breeds in intolerance as well. Whereas if we can be more open and accepting of various cultures and bring it and make it truly uniquely our own, or introduce it as something not just for this group or that group, but for everybody. I think we can have a better society and a better community. And in fact, I think last weekend we held our Obon weekend, and many of you were here for that as well. But during that, on Saturday we had the Bon Odori, the dancing, and one of the comments that came up by a number of people was how they really liked the fact that it was multicultural and also multi-generational. We had various generations, people from all walks of life, and everybody was welcome to join in, and everybody participated in the dancing together. And I think as we learn and grow from our experiences, we learn that the oneness that we share and the oneness that is expressed through the Dharma is truly what brings us all together and what is important. And I think by sharing these experiences with the wedding ceremonies as well, we can learn from different cultures. We can learn about how we accept things, and we can also reintroduce things to other cultures as well. But I thank you for coming today for our regular Sunday service. So next week, there's also another regular service. And then the following week will be the August Shotsuki memorial service. The week after that, there is actually not going to be a service here because many of us will be on Vancouver Island for the Obon Cemetery tour. So I would like to close this morning service with the recitation of the Nembutsu. And actually, please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. Thank you very much. Yes, for those of you here, please come on up and your shoko. Okay, so okay, thank you, everyone. This will conclude this morning's service. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you, Sensei.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Brett.
Sensei.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Have a great day.